Times are not good here. The city is crumbling into ashes. It's been buried under taxes and frauds and maladministration so that it's become a study for archaeologists. It's so bad when I write about it, no one's going to believe I'm telling the truth. That was written in the late 1800s, and things in New Orleans have not changed much, have they? It was my final day in the Deep South, and I had come full circle. 24 days ago, this is where I began the trip, only 2 miles from where I am right now. Way back then, I had spent most of my time in the heart of the city, filled with tourists and busybodies and the like. But this is not that. This is the dark side of New Orleans. You can drive around some of the worst sides of New Orleans, and you'll see things that'll scare you. You'll hear things and smell things that remind you this is as deep south as you can get. New Orleans might be one of the most popular tourist destinations in the country, but outside of the party scene is neighborhood after neighborhood of crime, poverty, and a very vague future. The hoods of New Orleans, Louisiana, where gas station workers keep machine guns behind the counter, where cops quit every 36 hours, where sensibilities and common sense go to die. My God, my God. Now, there are a lot of troubled areas in this city, and there are some really down and out places. A lot of this city's in bad shape, actually. I'm going to drive through all the worst neighborhoods in New Orleans to show you what they look like, and talk about what the hell's going on here. You might notice that visually, it's not as deplorable as many of the other urban ghettos I've shown in the past. But socioeconomically, man, this place sure is a mess right now. Right now we're in Central City. It's a neighborhood in New Orleans not too far from downtown. It's early morning. I always drive through the hoods at this time of the day, when it's mostly single moms heading to work and kids shuffling off to school. Seems like the least dangerous time to be out, doesn't it? You actually see quite a few smiles and waves this time of day, despite the living conditions. There really is no safe place in New Orleans anymore, but in some pockets like this, it's third world scary. Here, you have a 1 in 19 chance of being the victim of a crime. There are 15 crimes every day in this neighborhood. Shootings, robberies, assaults, carjackings, gangs, drugs, all of it. It wasn't too bad a place up until the 80s when the drug epidemic changed this place forever. It is Thug City now. Depending on what publication you read, New Orleans is somewhere in the top 5 in the nation for murder rates now. And as a city, this place has 4 times more crime per capita than Chicago. Violent crime has basically doubled here in the last 3 years. There's more than 500 carjackings in New Orleans every year. And get this, for the first month of 2023, there were 728 cars stolen here. In 1 month. God. Just the other day, a carjacker left a 1-year-old baby on the side of the damn road and just drove away. What is happening here? I could have been carjacked on this very street while I was recording. They box you in these narrow streets from front to back and stick a gun in your face. What can you do? Down here, settling things with violence is part of the culture. And they know they won't get in trouble. They used to lock everybody up here. I mean, Louisiana had the highest incarceration rate of any other democracy on earth. But then they were like, let's not lock as many people up anymore. They let them out on low bail, and it's become a revolving door with the legal system now. Even people accused of violent crimes are let out before trial. There's a huge shortage of cops here now. One New Orleans cop made national headlines when he quit just a few hours into his first shift. There's been reports of cops pulling in 100-hour work weeks. Kind of hard to do your job well when you're exhausted. But that's what they have to do here. There just aren't enough band-aids to cover up all the wounds. When there's big events in town, they have to bring in hundreds of cops from out of the area. And during Mardi Gras, all the local cops get tied up for like a month. The police response time in New Orleans is hours for 911 calls. If you're not bleeding, the cops might not come at all. It's not just cops, though. There's a shortage of everyone here. Counselors, jail staff, prosecutors. Would you want to do this for average pay? Nuh-uh. Law enforcement here does not get enough credit. So they hired some consultants to come in and figure out how to fix the crime problem in New Orleans. They were like, add a bunch more cops to the streets? I don't know. The report said, action must be taken now if there's a chance to save this city. But politicians don't want better. They want easy. I mean, they call it the Big Easy. The city of New Orleans contracts out to private companies to handle their car accidents now. One councilman here suggested bringing in the National Guard to help police the streets. The governor turned the idea down. That would probably be some bad optics, I'd imagine, right?
I'll help police the streets.
Mappy, put that damn thing away, would you? We're already on thin ice driving around these really rough hoods. You pull out a strap?
I'll cap anyone that messes with us, Nick.
No, Mappy, you won't. Now get in the back seat till we get back to the hotel. They're already looking at us. Can't have a damn goofy map drawing even more attention. Shit. It's like this in all of New Orleans hoods. You drive around and see the same conditions everywhere you go that's not in the historic district. Right now we're in Girt Town, another big trouble area for the city. It's just blocks from downtown. Everything looks edgy and neglected, and not what it looks like in the suburbs. I'll tell you that. Now, a lot of people will say New Orleans was getting better before COVID hit. And then when that happened, this place went batshit crazy. A lot of people here were out of work, and people were just desperate. But even after COVID, a lot of these people still haven't gone back to work. Women have really had a rough time here since COVID. 37 women were murdered here last year, and that's the most in 30 years. I hear it used to be that men would beat women up, but now they're shooting them and using their cars to run them over. My word. The New Orleans government's poorly run, according to a lot of people. The roads are bad, and the water and power are unreliable. In some parts of town, it's like living in a third world country, but in the USA. Or maybe we're becoming a third world country. But then again, all the handouts are giving some of these people no real reason to try. So I guess this is everyone's fault. Fuck. There was a motion in place to recall the city's mayor. To get a recall effort going, you have to have a certain percentage of voters. Well, it took them a while to get there because they first had to purge 50,000 ineligible people from the rolls. A lot of them were dead or had moved away to Texas or were felons. But in the end, the mayor was not recalled, much to the chagrin of those who are not criminals. Generational poverty and no education doesn't help. For a lot of these people, it's constant survival mode. Now, I talked with some women who work at a nonprofit in town. You'll see that interview later. But one takeaway from my discussion with them is the kids here need things to do. They're bored. Idle minds make for the devil's workshop. Now, I'm not making an excuse for the way these people act or anything, but I can understand how badly the kids need something positive to keep them busy. I mean, they're just begging for teachers to come into these neighborhoods. Most of these schools are lucky if they can get through the whole school day, much less give these kids any kind of after-school distractions or job training. Now we're in the lower Ninth Ward, which I'm sure you've heard about. This place is poor, but they kind of don't really seem to care. I mean, they polled people in this neighborhood, and 80% of them said the quality of their lives has deteriorated in the last 10 years, but 70% said they're optimistic about the future, and only 10% say they plan to leave. But if even only half that 10% leave, that'll be another big blow to a city already on the ropes. Is this political? Nobody wants to have a political conversation. Yes, they're defunding police everywhere and they're giving out welfare, which is a liberal problem. But somebody I know brought up another good point. He said the Republicans have spent $10 trillion funding wars all over the place and nothing was really accomplished there. Just a small part of that could make entire states modern. But it's hard to know exactly where to invest here. You can't just keep giving people welfare. I guess you could pay the cops more. But do you use a lot of money to fix the schools, the roads, the sewer system? Or do you let these hoods just kind of wither away and focus on the parts of the city that are still thriving? As you can see, this part of town was hit really bad during Katrina. A lot of people just left, just walked away and left everything behind. 20% of the city never returned. That means less tax revenue, which means less services. It's like a big downward spiral. And since crime's so high here, tourists are staying away more. 40% of the city's economy relies on tourism. So when they're not coming, that means less jobs, which means more poverty, which means more desperation and more crime. And there's going to be more giant storms here one day too. Scary to think about. Now this whole thing is just a real mess, and there is no solution that's been proposed. But what we're seeing here in New Orleans isn't that much different than a lot of the South, and it's not much different than a lot of our inner cities in America. It's a lot of people who have suffered serious misfortune. It's a lot of old, behind-the-times neighborhoods. It's no hope, no prospects, just day by day for a lot of these people. I think a lot of us would feel bad for the good people who are trying to hack out a living in neighborhoods like this. And the ones ruining it for everyone else, well, they're a big problem that we haven't been able to figure out a solution for. Sorry to end the trip like this, but it's the reality of what we face as Americans. And after nearly a month of driving throughout the Deep South, it was time to head home. If there's one thing I can take away from this trip, it was all the smiles and positivity. I saw a lot of misfortune down here, but I also saw and met a lot of people who seemed upbeat and optimistic. It's something you only find in the South, and I like it. Tell me what's going on in New Orleans, some of the issues that the city's having with crime and violence, and what you guys are trying to do to help.
So the crime basically, to me, is getting worse. It's getting more malicious. Now, as far as domestic violence, we're seeing that is definitely getting more malicious. And I'm not trying to discount anything, but years ago, it may have been like a basic slap or push or kick. Now it's escalating. The crimes are escalating. The survivors are being shot at. They're being ran over by cars. They're being stabbed. So we're seeing those types of things escalate.
So why are things escalating here?
I have no idea. I think that maybe people don't know how to handle their anger. There may not be enough resources. I know once COVID started, a lot of people were laid off. A lot of jobs, people were let go from their jobs. I think there is lack of resources.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys need? Is it just a funding thing?
Funding, jobs, education. Everybody's falling short. Everybody doesn't have enough staff, so it's a lack of resources all around.
So funding, like police, counselors, folks like you. I mean, what exactly does this, like, if you could pick, this is exactly what we need, and if we can get this, I think that we can make some progress, what would that be, in your opinion?
That's it's a really tough question, because I can't just pinpoint one thing. Like, we're suffering in many areas. I can't just pinpoint one thing to say it's a lack of this or a lack of that. It's a lack of a lot of, it's really the system, really.
How did it get to this point here that it's to the point that you can't even pinpoint exactly what is needed?
That's sad, and I'm just not sure. I'm not sure, Nick. I don't have the words for that. I'm not sure. It's sad, and I can't really blame anything, but I do know that it's a major issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do people, and it's a wonderful place here, and everybody says, I would never live anywhere else, despite the challenges. Out in the community, do people feel frustrated? Do you hear frustrations a lot from people that are like, what do we need to do to get this turned around?
I do hear frustration, but to a lot of people, this is home. People love New Orleans. It's a whole different culture here. So it's hard to leave. I left for school, but I did come back home. So this is always home, but there is some frustration. And I think that people have to come together to realize that it's an us problem. It's not just it's not my problem, so I'm not going to worry about it. Or it's not affecting me, and I'm not going to worry about it. It's everybody's problem in this city, and I think we all have a role in being a part of the solution. Whether it's providing different services, whether if it's you see something, say something. I think we all have to come together to help solve the issues.
Mm-hmm. I always hear it starts at home, and you guys work with families. I always hear you can throw as much money at it and as many police at it as you want, but it starts at home with families being intact. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. It definitely starts at home. What you learn at home is what you take out and what you give to the community. So it definitely starts at home. I definitely believe that wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm. So what's going on at home that isn't working?
We have maybe the parents, when they were kids, maybe they weren't taught values, or it could be lack of education, but I do think the cycle repeats. So whatever you learn, you pass on. So it could be a lack of whatever, and they didn't have that information, so they didn't have great information or values or education to pass on to the next generation, and so the cycle keeps repeating.
Mm-hmm. Do you see the same patterns when you talk to people that are in the situations? Things that they lack of something that they continually say, we don't have this, we need this, or this is why. our neighborhood is like this. This is why all the neighborhoods are struggling. Like, are there patterns that you see over and over?
I do hear like people that are graduating, let's say people that are graduating from college, they're definitely saying they're going to leave the city because there's nothing here in New Orleans. Like, there's no good jobs. We don't have any major corporations here, you know, that are bringing people in to want to stay here. So I do hear that a lot, that, you know, people are leaving. Or people are, why are you still here? Why are you staying? So I do hear that.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of jobs here. I mean, there's jobs all over the place, right?
From as far as I know, and you know, I think it may be your skill set. There may be a lot of jobs here, but if you don't have the skill set to apply, then, you know, and you're still in the same case, there's not, you know, jobs for you here.
Mm-hmm. Police, everybody says they need more police. Cities will take police away or they add more to the police. I know that the city's struggling with police to get people to be police officers. Is it more about teaching people to change their ways, or is it about getting more police on the streets to try to solve some of this stuff? Or, I mean, which is more important, do you think?
You know, I'm not sure, and I don't really want to speak on the police and you know what they need. So yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Okay. What is your organization doing to try to put a dent and turn the corner on this?
So we have started our AIR program. It's something new. We started an initiative program where somebody on our staff, she was working with one of the police districts, and when the police reports was coming in, she was privy to them as soon as they came in. So she was able to read the reports and also reach out to the victim of the crime to let them know about the services that we have here, to try to get more clients in to receive the services that they need, just to make sure that people know that there are agencies like ours that are out there that can provide them with assistance.
Do you guys need more funding?
I mean, we could always use more funding. I would never turn away funding, you know?
Mm. So, take off your, like, professional, and you're a resident of New Orleans. Mm-hmm. How do you personally feel about the situation with all the stuff that we're talking about?
Well, I would certainly love to live in a city, you know, that was crime-free. I'm worried about crime. You know, I make sure that I'm looking around my surroundings. Certain places I won't go to, depending on what time it is. And I'm more cognizant. You know, maybe I used to hang out later. Now, you know, I don't do those things. If it's not necessary for me to leave out, I may not, you know, so I'm being more vigilant, I guess. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I love New Orleans. I'll say that. Of course, this is my home. I was born and raised here. But I do wish that some things were different here. You know, I do wish that we could have certain events and not have to worry about crime, or if you turn on the news, you don't have to hear about, you know, like a carjacking or a shooting or something like that. So if that would change, I think that would be great.
Do you have hope?
I do.
You have to, right?
I do. I have to have hope. So I do have hope.
Okay, so I saw an article where you said that New Orleans is in crisis mode right now. What did you mean by that?
When I say crisis mode, I was talking about the crime. But the reason why we have so much crime is because of what's surrounding us. We stay in recovery. We've been in recovery from Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ida, COVID. So much disaster has happened around us, and it feels like we stand in a recovery mode, so we can never prosper. And so on top of trying to recovery, we have things that we're trying to do to revamp our city, but then in the midst, we have a lot of crime that's happening, and that's only because people are hurting. And the economy is bad. We do have jobs, but some people don't qualify for the jobs, or some people can't work for whatever reasons. And not only we're competing now with jobs where people can work from home. So the average job where we need a person to come into the office, people don't want those jobs no more. They want to be their own boss. And that's great. That's amazing. Everybody encourages entrepreneurship, right? So, but when I say in crisis, I'm talking about our recovery status, because we have had so much happen to this city.
Mm-hmm. Do you work with a lot of kids? Do you talk to a lot of teens and youth?
Yes, I do. Not in particular here, but part of it is here. But I do work with a lot of youth in the community, and I have opportunity to talk to a lot of youth in the community. So, yes.
So how do they feel about?
The opportunity is not here. So when you want to see a thriving city, right, you have to provide opportunities for youth. We don't have opportunities for youth. You can just travel up to Houston. You will see that there's so much for kids to do. You have amusement parks, theme parks, water parks, so much. And so if you bring those type of opportunities, you also creating jobs for them to even work, to be able to appreciate that. So I think if we focus more on our youth and developing things around our youth, then we will start to see a difference in our city. We have to start with our kids. The kids will lead the way. We don't have a bowling alley. We don't have a skating ring. We don't have things that would just take their mind off of crime. We just don't have enough for our kids to do. I mean, there was a time when they used to go to school dances. You had a dance every Friday. They don't even do that. It's like they're trying to find their way, and they're falling into a life of crime because that's entertainment, right? We know that's not entertainment, but to them in their mind, that is entertainment. We need entertainment. Entertainment keeps us well grounded, and we need that for our youth. That's what we're missing in the city of New Orleans.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff for adults to do.
Yeah, but and that's fine. Like I say, I love it all day, but that's what our kids are saying, and that's what I'm hearing. You know, we have our recreational Nord, football, basketball, sports. We have that, and it's amazing. The city of New Orleans, I mean, they're doing amazing, but we need more. And it's going to take a community to do that. And it's going to take everybody coming together. You know, one person can't do it. It's going to take everybody working together to change the dynamics of our city.
Is that why a lot of people move to Texas, just because there's just more to do?
That's what I hear. I mean, I don't have no numbers or no stats to back it up, but it's just because they have more to do. It's bigger, beautiful. But to me, I feel like we can be bigger and better. We have that quality. Because we're an agency, we service victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, stalking, and family violence. When kids grow up in that type of home, and there's nothing else that can detour them away from what they're seeing, they're gonna repeat that cycle because that's what they learn. That's what they learn. So we have to help them. They depend on us to help them, and we have to make that change.
Do you have hope that there's going to be?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's my city. I love my city. I'm not going anywhere. I love New Orleans. Yeah. We can't give up on New Orleans. And like Dr. Gray said, so many people have moved away, but home is home. You can't give up on home. I always encourage, if you did move away and life is great and better, don't forget about home. Just send a little bit back and take care of home. Don't let home die.
You know, to say that we live in a city, which is a beautiful city, and there's so much to do, but you're too afraid to go out and enjoy it. So,
you know, part of it comes to opportunity. You know, we have a criminal justice system that has been unfair to communities of color and have had disparate impact on them. So if a white person in New Orleans gets arrested for doing the same thing that a black man gets arrested, more than likely he's going to get a diversion program so that he can continue working and, you know, providing for his family. And if you're an African American person who can't make bail or doesn't have a job, then you're going to sit in jail for maybe months, sometimes years. So, I mean, I think we have to look at those issues and really think about how we're going to invest in families and how we're going to create interventions for perpetrators that are not just punitive. We can't jail away this problem because what we're doing is destroying communities of color. We're destroying families. Many of our survivors say, I don't want the relationship to end. I want the violence to end. And in honesty, you know, we've we've passed a lot of laws, and I've been part of that for 20 years. I've been part of this work. And yet we have only come up with criminal justice responses that are very punitive. And so we're really thinking about, what do we do for perpetrators who have never really learned what a healthy relationship is? We need family justice centers for perpetrators as much as we need for survivors. So until we're dealing with the whole family and really coming up with interventions that are safe, that are comprehensive, that are not punitive, that don't destroy the families, I don't know that we're ever going to deal with the violence. Because what's happening in New Orleans is that this violence in the home is now on the streets. And that's why we're seeing it, because these kids are just so traumatized. And there's no mental health services for them. We have 8 therapists here, and we have a waiting list of over 100 people. So, we could use 10 more therapists and probably still have a waiting list. So the needs are great. We need much more preventive services so that we're not just doing intervention after all the violence has happened. Because then, the damage is already done and you're trying to recover from a lot of damage. We need really prevention programs so that we invest in kids. Most of the funding that we get are to serve survivors. I just really believe home should be a place that people feel safe. That's a right, I think, that, the one place that you should feel safe and empowered and loved and supported should be in the home.
It's almost like, when are we going to stop surviving and start thriving?
Are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. And I can also help you find your new house, too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home, too. That's right. I know awesome, reliable agents all over the country, and I'd love to connect you to somebody who can help you search for that perfect home. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.